There is a quiet psychological shift that separates the woman who constantly struggles for what she wants from the woman who seems to receive it almost effortlessly. It is not beauty, it is not luck, and it is certainly not manipulation. It is something far more powerful and far more subtle. A mindset, a psychological position. Some women move through life negotiating for acceptance, trying to make situations work, convincing themselves that patience and effort will eventually turn uncertainty into love, respect, and opportunity. But there is another type of woman, a woman who never chases, never negotiates her worth, never over-explains her standards. And strangely, life rearranges itself around her. In this video, you will uncover the deeper psychological framework behind that phenomenon. You will understand why some women repeatedly attract confusion, mixed signals, and emotional exhaustion, while others naturally attract respect, clarity, and powerful opportunities. You will discover the hidden mindset that quietly determines whether people rise to meet you or slowly take you for granted. The psychological mistake that keeps intelligent women stuck in cycles of trying harder instead of receiving more. And the powerful internal standard that instantly changes how the world responds to you. By the end of this video, you will see relationships, attention, and opportunities through a completely different psychological lens. And once you see it, you will never again confuse effort with value or attention with alignment. Stay with me until the end, because the final insight may completely change the way you approach relationships, self-respect, and the standards that shape your entire life. Before we dive in, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. There is a subtle moment in every woman's life when she begins to notice a quiet pattern. Two women may walk into the same room, live in the same world, have similar opportunities, similar intelligence, and sometimes even similar backgrounds. Yet their lives unfold in strikingly different ways. One woman spends years trying to make things work, trying to be understood, trying to hold relationships together, trying to prove her value, trying to maintain peace, even when something inside her feels unsettled. The other woman moves through life with a calm certainty. She does not chase. She does not negotiate her self-respect. And somehow, opportunities, respect, and healthy relationships appear to organize themselves around her. The difference is rarely visible on the surface, but psychologically, it is profound. It begins with an internal orientation toward life, an orientation that quietly determines what a person accepts, what they refuse, and what they unconsciously signal to the world about their own worth. A curious reality about human behavior is that people rarely respond only to words or even actions. They respond far more strongly to internal signals, subtle patterns of confidence, boundaries, expectations, and self-respect that leak through tone, posture, decisions, and emotional reactions. When a person operates from uncertainty, the nervous system communicates hesitation. When a person operates from clarity and standards, the nervous system communicates stability. Over time, the environment adapts to whichever signal is repeated most often. This is why two people can behave kindly, respectfully, and intelligently, yet receive completely different treatment from the world around them. One is perceived as negotiable, while the other is perceived as non-negotiable. And the difference lies less in external behavior and more in the psychological standards quietly guiding that behavior. Many intelligent women unknowingly fall into a mindset that appears admirable but gradually drains their power. It is the mindset of constant effort. They believe that patience, empathy, and persistence will eventually transform any difficult situation into a healthy one. They believe that if they communicate clearly enough, love deeply enough, or give enough chances, the situation will eventually evolve into what they hoped for. At first glance, this appears virtuous, and in many ways it is. Compassion, patience, and commitment are beautiful human qualities. But when these qualities operate without boundaries, they slowly turn into something else: tolerance for what should never become normal. Human psychology is deeply shaped by repetition. The brain is constantly building internal baselines for what feels familiar and acceptable. When someone repeatedly tolerates confusion, inconsistency, or subtle disrespect, the brain gradually stops interpreting those experiences as warnings. Instead, it begins to categorize them as ordinary. Once that shift occurs, the person may continue experiencing the same patterns without realizing that their internal standard has quietly moved downward. What once felt unacceptable begins to feel merely inconvenient, and what once felt painful begins to feel expected. Research in behavioral psychology often refers to this phenomenon through concepts related to conditioning and expectation. Studies published in journals such as the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology have repeatedly shown that individuals with strong internal standards and clear boundaries tend to evoke more respectful behavior from others over time, not because they demand it verbally, but because their behavioral patterns consistently signal that certain dynamics will simply not be entertained. Human beings are highly adaptive social creatures. When someone repeatedly demonstrates calm self-respect and emotional stability, others quickly learn that manipulation, inconsistency, or disrespect will not gain access to that person's life. Another important discovery in modern psychology concerns the way expectations shape perception and opportunity. Research from institutions such as Stanford and findings, often discussed within the Psychological Science Journal, highlight how the brain functions as a prediction system. It constantly scans the environment and organizes attention around what it expects to find. When a person internally expects disappointment or scarcity, the brain becomes highly sensitive to confirming evidence. When a person expects quality, respect, and meaningful connection, attention begins filtering reality in a different way. Opportunities that once went unnoticed suddenly appear visible. Unhealthy dynamics become easier to recognize early. Decisions that once felt frightening begin to feel obvious. This does not mean life becomes perfect or that challenges disappear. Rather, it means the individual begins interacting with life from a position of clarity rather than negotiation. And clarity has a powerful psychological effect. It simplifies decisions. Instead of asking endless questions about how to fix a situation, the mind naturally asks a different question: whether the situation deserves continued investment at all. One of the most transformative shifts occurs when a woman develops a low tolerance for misalignment. Low tolerance does not mean harshness or arrogance. It simply means recognizing early signals that a dynamic is not healthy, respectful, or aligned with one's values. Many people ignore these early signals because they appear small: an inconsistent pattern of communication, a subtle lack of accountability, a recurring feeling that one's presence is appreciated only when convenient. Individually, these signals may appear insignificant, but psychologically they accumulate, shaping how a person experiences themselves within the relationship. Over time, the most powerful women learn to observe patterns rather than isolated moments. Anyone can behave well occasionally. Anyone can say the right words temporarily. But patterns reveal character. When patterns begin to conflict with personal values, clarity replaces hesitation. The decision is no longer about proving loyalty or patience. It becomes about protecting one's sense of self. Another dimension of this psychological framework involves the distinction between attention and quality. Attention is abundant in modern social environments. Technology, social networks, and constant communication make it easier than ever for people to receive messages, compliments, invitations, and opportunities. Yet abundance of attention does not automatically translate into meaningful connection or genuine respect. In fact, abundance without discernment can become overwhelming and distracting. The women who consistently build fulfilling lives tend to adopt a philosophy of curation. Just as an art gallery selects only certain pieces to display, They recognize that not every opportunity deserves space in their lives. This perspective transforms the entire experience of relationships and opportunities. Instead of feeling grateful for any form of attention, they quietly evaluate whether the interaction elevates their character, their peace of mind, and their long-term direction in life. Interestingly, neuroscience offers insight into why this approach becomes increasingly powerful over time. When individuals repeatedly make decisions aligned with their values, the brain reinforces neural pathways associated with self-trust. Self-trust is one of the most underestimated psychological strengths. It allows a person to make decisions calmly rather than anxiously. Instead of fearing loss, the person begins to trust that walking away from what is wrong creates space for what is right. This shift reduces emotional chaos and replaces it with quiet confidence. There is also a deeper philosophical element to this way of living. Life often reflects the internal dignity with which a person treats themselves. When someone constantly abandons their own values to maintain temporary comfort, the world begins to mirror that instability. But when someone protects their integrity, even in private decisions no one else sees, life gradually responds with experiences that match that internal stability. Respect attracts respect. Clarity attracts clarity. Integrity attracts people who recognize and value it. Another fascinating observation is that many women who eventually developed this mindset were not always this way. In fact, many reached it after experiencing disappointment or heartbreak that forced them to examine their patterns. Instead of becoming cynical, they became wiser. They realized that feelings alone cannot guide important decisions. Emotions are powerful signals, but they are not always reliable leaders. When emotions are balanced with principles, decisions become far more stable. The result of this psychological evolution is not coldness or detachment. On the contrary, it allows a woman to feel deeply while remaining anchored in self-respect. She can appreciate connection without losing herself inside it. She can care about others without sacrificing her identity to maintain their approval. This balance creates a presence that people instinctively respect. And over time, something remarkable begins to happen. The types of people who once felt drawn to inconsistency or emotional games gradually lose interest because the environment no longer rewards those behaviors. Meanwhile, individuals who value maturity, sincerity, and stability begin to appear more frequently. The external world has not magically changed. Rather, the internal filter has evolved. Ultimately, the most powerful shift is not learning how to chase better outcomes. It is learning how to become internally unavailable for outcomes that diminish one's dignity. When that shift happens, life becomes less about constant struggle and more about alignment. Decisions become simpler. Relationships become healthier. Opportunities become clearer. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this transformation is that it does not require becoming someone entirely new. It simply requires removing the quiet limitations that once convinced a person they had to accept less than they deserved. Once those limitations dissolve, standards rise naturally. And when standards rise with humility, wisdom, and integrity, life slowly begins to rise with them. Before you leave, look at the screen. The next video appearing now is titled 6 Silent Habits That Make a Woman See You as a Weak Man. Watch it now. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.